Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's FPV podcast. This week, we got a special guest that's really going to talk to us a lot about Horizon Spektrum radios, in which he has a lot of knowledge. And Elvin over here is trying to show off his puny little muscles, which, you know, they don't show up on TV. I'm sorry to tell you this. It doesn't work.
Man, it don't add 5 pounds to my arm.
5 pounds of fat. Elvin, say hello before we introduce our guest.
Hello, everybody. We got some good stuff going on this week. I hope everybody's gone out there and having fun. And don't forget, Heli Direct's got free shipping. Free shipping.
All right, our special guest, Aaron, who's going to tell us a lot about Spektrum radios. Please give us a little bit about yourself.
Hi. Well, I've known Al for a long time. I used to work at a couple of the hobby shops around the Portland area.
Yeah.
And then I managed to somehow piece together a career in the hobby. And I'm working at Horizon Hobby now. And I've been out here for 5 years in Illinois. And I'm very fortunate to have a career at this very, very nice company. That's so I started working in manuals, and I was a technical writer. And then I got bounced around a little bit and promoted into brand management for a little while. And then I spent a couple of years in the product development team. And I had a couple of things that I considered, real successful that I was real proud of. And, things that in the end, I ended up getting shifted over to manuals again. And that was after 3 years in development. And I'm really happy working in manuals. I'm actually doing the full layout now. So I not only do the writing, but I also do the layout. And I certainly don't write all the manuals at Horizon. There's a full manuals team. Yeah. And very fortunate that they've helped me and taught me the knowledge that I don't have, which is coming up to speed on the graphic art side was quite a challenge. But I brought to the table the depth of knowledge on the hobby side, which
is immense.
So anyway, I have been flying since I was a very young boy, probably kindergarten or second, something like that. I don't know.
Y'all 10. He was 10. He was 10 years old. Let me help y'all out real quick. Aaron is one of those kids that got good parents. I got to say that. I've known him for a long, long time. So I'll say he's got great parents. His mom and his dad are good people. They tried to bring up a good son. They did that. That's a little love because we spend a lot of time together. When Aaron comes up here, we spend a lot of time flying together. So I can say that.
Mom has to have Al over for dinner. It's
So and it's laughing and joking. No, not just serious.
Yeah, seriously. So, but my parents didn't just give me airplanes growing up. I had to mow lawns and stuff. And I had a cousin who built airplanes, and occasionally I'd get an airplane from him. But I had access to the ability to earn money, but I wasn't just given things. And I did start building very young. I was building airplanes by the time I was in third grade, and I would build them and demolish them and then keep going and build something else. I don't know how I had the perseverance to keep at it because I didn't figure out how to fly. I didn't have any help, and I didn't figure out how to fly until I was in 7th grade. And what's funny? So actually, I used to it's in the garage. I had a little airplane that my cousin gave me, and I have another one today that's identical to it. Anyway, so I had that airplane. I used to take it on the school bus with me with fuel and everything, leave it in the counselor's office, and then fly it after school. And my mom would pick me up after school when she was on her way home. So one day I was at school in this place in where I used to live in Oregon, and this guy shows up with a helicopter. And I was like, whoa, this is so cool. And, the other thing that happened that day, and I'll never forget, is he explained to me what cyclic, however you want to pronounce it, theory is about how rotor heads work, and this like light bulb went off in my head, and I'd always wondered about it, and I was really interested, and then I fully understood it the moment he explained it to me. That guy was Dennis.
Yeah.
And that happened, when I was in like 7th grade. And then years later, I was working at a hobby shop in the Portland area, buying parts from this guy out of his basement or out of his apartment for Hornet helicopters. And then I realized it was the same guy. And Dennis actually ended up buying this old radio from him. And Al knows Dennis because Al used to fly with Dennis. And this is a JR-10 SX radio that was Dennis's. Dennis passed away a few years ago.
Yeah.
2 years ago now?
2 years. 2 years. It's been 2 years.
He was a fixture in the hobby around the Portland area with the helicopter scene for a long time. He used to have a company called DT Enterprises. I worked with him for some time. He sponsored me, actually. He was my first sponsor.
Yep.
And so, yeah, Dennis LaFond.
Yeah, cool. Dennis was my teacher, so I'll say that. Dennis was my teacher, and he found me poor landing on the side of the road somewhere, and I met him. I was out flying somewhere, like, I'm one of those guys. Aaron can tell you. I'm like, let's stop. Let's fly right here. Let's fly right here. And he's like, what? No. Right here. We can fly all around this area. And that's how I like to do things. So Dennis caught me one day flying somewhere where it was kind of good. It was acceptable, but it wasn't acceptable.
He's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm flying. He's like, I can see that, but you shouldn't be flying here. And I'm like, well, where am I supposed to fly at? He's like, why don't you come fly with us? So like, that's how I got involved with the RC community here. That was like, let's see, 90. That was 93. Because that was 93. We had just moved from.
So you would have been flying with this radio.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah,
he was. Yeah, because I had at that time I had a Futaba Super 7. Ooh. That's when I was still a Futaba boy.
7U. Boy, everything was abbreviations, wasn't it?
Yeah, the first computerized radio.
My gosh, there were people that made a living writing manuals to redo the manual that those things came with.
Right.
What was it, Harry Higley and the other one? There was another one available. Anyway, this radio, believe it or not, this was $1,500 and it's a 10-channel radio with a touchscreen.
And in 1993.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, so I've known Aaron a long time, and Aaron is one of those dudes that 20 years from now, he could be that guy that we like. You, what's that old mean guy that shows up at the AMA every time?
I was thinking you were going to say he's going to be the CEO, but no, he calls you the old curmudgeon that shows up and hits the kids over the head with a cane.
You fly inside the flight line.
I'm more likely to be the guy that like comes out of the basement with some harebrained idea or something. Yeah. But
we do have he's one of those guys that just kind of like he'll say something and I'll say something. Then it's like okay, so who can out top the other one, right? And we're back and forth, right? So like I wanted to say that, but what we here for is to talk about long range.
Okay, hold on.
I like talking about Spektrum, and Spektrum radios are great radios. I'm a Spektrum boy. I left Futaba in 95 because they burned me on some product, and I said, fuck them. And that's how it is. And but
Is that what it was? And then when Spektrum came around, you started dabbling with that.
Yeah, that's how it was. That's exactly what it was. So, but Aaron is like one. Also, I wanted to say this. Aaron is like one of those 3D helicopter pilots. That's where we really clicked. You know, he's like I'm a great critique guy and team coach or whatever, and Aaron's great at listening. You know, like, you know, if you tell him to tighten something up, he actually tightens it up. He doesn't go back to do it again and screw it all up from the get-go, you know. And Aaron is also one of the few dudes that coined the phrase a figure 9. So if you guys don't know what that is, when you go up to do a loop and it turns into a 9, you don't have nothing to fly at home.
I don't want to be pulling figure 9.
Anyway, but
okay. Let's go ahead and start getting into some of the subjects, because like he's done a lot. So
I mean, it's so hard to bring him in.
You want to talk about balsa wood? You want to talk about slope sword?
Right.
Definitely. Hold on. Okay, so let's talk about helis, because it seems like both of you had the same teacher, Dennis, right?
Yeah.
Is that true?
Well, sort of. Yeah. I mean, he didn't really teach me, but I knew him and I worked with him. So anyway.
So tell me some heli stories. Like, how did you meet Dennis, and how did he become your mentor or teacher or friend?
Well, like I was saying, so he taught me at, you know, that first theoretical thing, and that was phenomenal, because after that I was able to actually kind of move on towards, slowly but eventually I did. I learned how to fly helicopters on my own with a really great little product called the Light Machines helicopter that was a plywood frame with a little
frame. Yeah.
I have one. One of my other deceased friends actually.
Oh, Cricket, right? Cricket.
No, a Light Machine a Light Machine helicopter. LMH 116 is what I had, with a little
Yeah.
Anyway, I built it and flew it around my yard, and then eventually I ended up getting a Raptor 30, and I flew the snot out of it, and I flew it until, what did I do? Oh, I bogged it down, and I loaded it up and like killed the engine almost in flight, and just like annihilated it. And then I got a Skidoo 50, and then eventually, you know, I was flying pretty serious helicopters, and then somehow I landed this job out of the blue as the editor of RC Heli magazine, and I moved off to LA, and I spent a couple years building like every helicopter on the market and reviewing them for the magazine, and writing, and I don't know how many I wrote over 100 articles for the magazine. I was kind of, you know, it was my baby. And so RC helicopter scene, like during that big growth period, I started in 2006 till 2008. And that was definitely an amazing time for me. So, yeah, RC helicopters are like my bread and butter, and I've flown like everything on the market practically. Not necessarily everything that's out today.
Yeah,
I'm pretty familiar with everything. So,
yeah, it's pretty cool.
There's nothing out there.
I'm probably one of only. I only know of one other person for sure, but there's got to be more people. But there's very few of us who fly full aerobatics with a helicopter FPV. So, I mean, you can't really fly backwards, but as long as you can see where you're going, I can hover inverted, I can do sideways tic-tocs, I can do nose down tic-tocs, I can do death spirals, I can do everything. It's wild. I've even pulled off an auto rotation. And so
that's pretty cool. I'd love to see some FPV of that, you know, like FPV aerobotics.
I've got a pretty big YouTube channel. It's not like, I've got a lot of videos. I try to share my experiences. So I wouldn't say I've got a ton of viewers, but I try to put my stuff out there. So.
Oh, pretty cool. What's your YouTube channel?
You need one of those special mustaches. That's what you need. You need.
Don't even start. What's your YouTube channel?
It's Arraon Red Baron.
Arraon Red Baron.
Yeah.
All right, cool. I'll definitely check it out, because I do want to see some of those videos, because helis are actually really fun to watch. Not necessarily want to stand next to one, but they are kind of fun to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's a trip when you're flying FPV with a helicopter too, and you can go ripping by, and especially when you're flying with other FPV guys, they don't expect. Well, I don't know. Nobody really expects it. So I've come to where it's totally comfortable, and I don't think it's weird, but people think I'm completely nuts when I spool up the helicopter and with the goggles on, and people who are very, very good pilots and are very, very intimidated.
Yes.
You're not watching that? Like, wait a minute. Let me take a step back. All right. Hey, Elvin, how did you become the mentor of Dennis? Give us your little background history of learning helis.
Dennis was I don't know, I'm one of those guys where if I want to learn something, I'll actually go to the library and I'll find the books. I'll do all the research and I'll sit there and I'll read and read and read and read, and then I'll come back and read and read again. I need to fully understand what I'm doing so that I can feel like I'm accomplishing something. I test everything. I'm one of those guys. I won't. I won't fly my ship around other people unless I've flown it 10 times. That's just automatic for me. That's one of those things I learned from NASA. They test stuff at least 10 times. If it don't fire off 10 times, they don't trust it around to go off when it's supposed to. So, but I met Dennis like I said, I was out flying and I met Dennis, and Dennis asked me to come fly with them. I went to go fly with them at the club field. I flew that day. They asked me to do some things. This was that time where, you go somewhere and they go, okay, so if you came to be a pilot and you're supposed to be able to do this, and this. We're trying to find out where you fit in with the group. It was basically a proficiency test, right? So, they started calling stuff out, and I had never heard these names that they were using. Like, I didn't know what the name was, and I didn't know what a funnel was. I called that a hurricane. And today there's a actual hurricane maneuver, and so I didn't have no clue because I was flying by myself. So, and then Dennis came up to me and he started at the field. He started talking to me and he said, okay, so you see how I want you to do this. And he started talking to me. And as he was talking to me, I was just following his commands. And he said, see, you know what you're doing. You just don't know what they're telling you it is. So he walked me through the proficiency test, and I scored like in the high 80% of everything they asked me to do. So
flying now.
Huh?
What were you flying?
I was flying a Concept 30DX at the time. That freaking plastic, that the exploder head. Remember the exploder head from Kyosho?
It was a float head, wasn't it? There was no spindle.
No, there wasn't a spindle. So and he's telling me, to do stuff, and I was doing it. So I knew that I had somebody that I could understand, and he understood how to tell me to do stuff. So I asked him to coach me. I said, hey, look, I want to do this better. I want to be better at this. You tell me what I need to do to become the best that I can be. And he told me, he said, practice in the morning, practice after work, practice every day. He said, every day you get up in the morning, you go practice for an hour. You put your stuff away, clean up, put your stuff on the charger. Back then I was charging my radio battery, the radio batteries.
NICADs?
Yeah. So I would keep keep 2 or 3 batteries around and charge those up and then go flying on them. And so that's what he told me to do. So I did that, and I could see that my skills were getting sharper. They were getting cleaner. My turns were getting better. My lines were getting, so I competed that year. in the local club competition, and I took second place, and
Pretty cool.
I was just like, and he got me there. I mean, it was, I came out of nowhere. I mean, a lot of guys don't know this, but when I was a little boy, I was told that they didn't know if a black dude could fly, right? And they didn't say black dude. I heard them say the other word. I'm sorry. But that's why I fly today. And I teach everybody that I get my hands on. If I can help you get in the air, I feel like I'm doing something not just for me, but for the community. I want to see everybody fly. I want to see everybody. So, and I don't want no stipulations on whether or not it's nationality, race. I've seen guys paraplegics fly. So, we can all fly. It's not about what you are. It's about the drive. If you put the effort forth, you can fly. You can become a great pilot. If you practice, practice, practice. That's something Dennis used to tell me all the time. Practice, practice. Al, your lines is you need to practice some more.
And that it's like Dennis could be kind of a curmudgeony older guy,
Right.
But the fact of the matter is that it didn't see. He was colorblind, and he was welcoming to
everybody.
To everybody, and he was just he was kind of like everybody's friend, but he was also kind of like rough around the edges and kind of got on people's nerves a little bit, but everybody loved him. And anyway,
hey, you know what? There are certain people that can just pull that off, and it's really good to hear, like people like that out there. And then you two are kind of carrying on that legacy of, trying to get other people into the sport, and being enthusiastic about it. And that's what it's all about. It's really
right. Spread the love, man.
Spread the love. I love that. All right, Aaron, let's get back on subject.
Yeah.
So you spent.
Sorry about that.
No, it was a good story. So you were in R&D. I think one of the things that you worked on the most, and it's getting to be a very popular technology, which is head tracking technology. So tell us a little bit about that, and like what you had to go through in order to get all of that working.
So I spent a couple of years as a product developer for Spektrum, and one of the products, the focal line of headsets, was one of the things I had the opportunity to work on. I did not do all the engineering on it. I'm part of a team, and I was a small part of the team, so I don't want to take the whole credit by any means. But I was very proud to be able to do the work that I did and be part of it. So the focal headset was an idea that we brought forth where it actually uses the head tracking module that Fat Shark developed and is able to send the signal, which would normally be a PPM signal, that's connected to the goggles with the conventional head tracking connector. And the focal headsets still have that connector. But it's also connected to a module from Spektrum, which transmits to the Spektrum radios. Now, the Spektrum radios today, all the Spektrum radios have wireless buddy box. And the wireless buddy box, it's basically got a receiver in all the transmitters, so you can connect another radio to it. So, what we did is we made it so that we can piggyback on that technology for head tracking. And so this headset kind of acts like a little transmitter. It's a very short range transmitter, but it's capable of going far enough to be able to do wireless head tracking and work really well. So like this Red Bull, and I'll have to send you guys a link for the video. I've got a head tracking camera gimbal on it here, and I've flied around. It's so awesome to be able to have a head tracking experience really set up well so that you can feel comfortable and look around, and everything's, it's a stable airplane, and it's what I would consider the correct perspective, because it's not necessarily the same as the the scale perspective. You know, it might be done a little bit differently than the real airplane. But in any event, so the wireless head tracking it'll work with any of the current Spektrum radios or any of them that have wireless buddy box, and it's pretty cool. And it also does some things that you know we were looking for a couple years ago that was really frustrating. You couldn't do, like, for instance, when I first started, I was actually doing head tracking with the DX8, and I had to use a rubber band at first and then I modified my radio. I killed the warranty because I put a switch where the bind button used to be able to hold the head tracking down. And then I had to mess with the mixing or the trainer setup to be able to do what I wanted. But when you're using an input for a trainer like that, you can't use all of the radio's reverse settings and let's see. Is my video still coming through?
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, it's frozen on my end. I don't know why. So the reverse settings and the travel settings and all those things, you can't use that standard menu in the radio because it's basically using the signal from the student radio. So in this case, the head tracker. So in the past, you know, you've had to use this painful button menu programming thing that's in the Fat Shark headsets to be able to reverse the servo direction and set endpoints and all these things.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a menu now built into the Spektrum radios, a sub menu. My radio is a DX18 Gen 2. And there's a sub menu built in where you can do all your FPV mixing right in the trainer menu in a specialized FPV trainer menu. So it literally does everything you need for head tracking. You can reverse the signal, you can do the endpoints, and you can reassign it. So we actually have this thing operating, the head tracker that is, on some like high channel count numbers, 17, 18, 19, and 20. 17, I think, is our channel frequency thing. More about that later, but if you want to cover that, it's got another feature in there.
Right.
18, 19, and 20 are pan, tilt, and roll. So pan, tilt, and roll come in on these high channel count numbers, so it won't mess with you for your flight modes or something accidentally.
Mm-hmm.
Then
cool.
This menu is fully configurable, and you can pull in 18 and go to 4 or 6 or 7 or wherever you want to put it, so you can make it really easy to use any receiver you want. So the setup that I've got in this Red Bull is really kind of ideal. What I've got going here is an AR-7700 receiver, and the AR-7700 receiver is a full-range receiver,
mm-hmm.
and it has a PPM output, and it also has a serial output. If you're using a different flight control, it's a little faster, but it's got the PPM output as well, so it's compatible with like everything. In this case, I'm using the Vector.
Pretty cool.
The 7700 has direct channel connection for your, let's see, what channels are they? I think it's 6, 7, and 8, or 5, 6, and 7. Anyway, there's auxiliary channels on the AR-7700. Those are the only servo outputs. The others are all serial outputs. So when you're using an AR-7700, you're going to be using a flight controller. That's what it's designed to be used for. But it also will work directly with the servos you need for the head tracker. So on this Red Bull setup, I have, let's see if I can pull the hatch. I have everything buried in it, but I don't have a lot of wires. It's pretty clean. And this thing is packed full of technology. One of the things that's really cool is there's nothing exposed on it except the camera. Everything is buried. So you're not going to find the video transmitter or the GPS antenna or anything. The AR-7700 only has one connector, the PPM, into the Vector. And then it's got 2 servo connectors that go directly to the head tracker. And that's all it needs for the receiver. It also uses a remote receiver, which I have as far away from everything as I possibly can on the tail. With a configuration like this, a standard Spektrum system is good to go pretty darn far. I mean, I don't want to recommend people go really far and push the limits unless they understand what they're doing. But when you optimize everything with a Spektrum system, this Red Bull airplane will go out well past a mile, and my record is 1.8 miles.
Now that's far for Spektrum, guys.
That's far for almost anything.
People don't realize. Hold on, Aaron. Let's sit here for a little bit. People, we fly quads pretty much all over the place. All of us, we fly planes pretty much all over the place, and you really don't have an idea of how far things can get. You know what I mean? You're out flying around, and you like tonight. I was out flying, and the hatch flew off or something, and I went looking for the hatch, thinking it was further out, and actually it was 200 yards closer to me when I was flying. So I actually walked past the ship and the hatch. Anyway, but what I'm saying is, you don't really realize where distance is until you actually have to walk it. And if you don't believe me, take your keys in your backyard and throw them.
No, don't do that.
You think you threw it over there, but by the time you get over there, you're like, holy crap, I'm like really far away from the house, So like anything a mile.
I don't know where you're going with that, but
right. Anything a mile is far, but anything after that is exceptional. So like walking a mile to go look for your plane can be a pain in the ass if you don't know what you're doing.
Mind you, when I did that, I was flying over open farm field.
Right.
And I was flying in a situation where I now know the airplane pretty darn well. I've tested the return to home system many, many times. And it's capable of, when you do some kind of flying like that, you're first of all, you got to expect that you're going to lose the airplane. Second of all, you don't ever try to fly high because you want to try to keep it below our recommended altitudes and everything and play like, safe. This was below 400 feet. It might have gone a lot further if I was trying to fly high. 400-foot altitude, you're starting to limit things because of you're flying closer to the ground. The further out you fly, you need to fly higher in order to avoid the ground affecting the signal.
The curvature of the Earth.
Well, I'm not sure at that distance if it's really the curvature of the Earth, but when you're flying, I think it is. You're right. I mean, it begins to affect it, but it's more of like a something about the pull. The ground has a pulling effect on the radio frequency, so that's why RC cars can't expect the same range with similar technology as airplanes. And the closer you get to the ground, the further out you go, the more you're pushing the limits. So if you have a hard limit of 400 feet, it gets more and more challenging the further out you go. So anyway, I don't recommend doing that unless you really know what you're doing and you really know your airplane. And then you're like ready to sign off on it. And if it does sign off, it's going somewhere where it's not going to hurt anything. Like, wet farm fields that aren't going to start. It's like
definitely. No, that's important.
Rock on the ocean.
No, it's really important to follow safety rules, right? So really, you really want to follow what Aaron's saying is that first few times, definitely under 400 feet. With large airplanes like that, you can definitely stay within line of sight, definitely have some binoculars. Things like that are easy enough. But
you can see this Red Bull airplane out past 1.5 miles. I mean, it gets out there, it's a speck, but we're still flying with people who can see it. So
definitely
trying to.
So this is actually a good time to talk about, Spektrum and really pulling the range out of your Spektrum radios, which is kind of where Elvin wanted to go when we asked Aaron to come on to the podcast. So, Aaron, like say a person like me who's used to flying within 100 yards of their aircraft, and that's our norm. But we decided, we really want to start stretching out what we can do. So we want to go half a mile, and, incrementally start stretching out how far we can fly. What are your recommendations? And, Al, jump in anytime.
So first of all, you should recognize that there's technology you're using to maximize performance for a racing quad. It's not necessarily the best thing for long range. The 4649 and 4648 quad racing receivers are perfectly suited for a quad racing course, but I wouldn't try flying far with them.
Right.
If you want to try flying far, you want to try using what we consider a full range receiver. And a full range receiver takes advantage of what's called multipath technology. And multipath technology, or multi-link technology, pardon me, when you use remote receivers, you've probably heard of remote receivers. Some people call them satellite receivers, but it's a very important part of Spektrum technology, and it's something that offers big advantages. It has more advantages the larger the airplane is and the more complicated it is, and the larger the components are that can cause shielding effects. So, for instance, if you have a sailplane with nothing electronic and a tiny little battery, you might be able to get away with really, really good range on that 4648 receiver. But as soon as you put it on a quad and you go flying a couple hundred feet away, and then maybe you push it to 1,000 feet and then 1,500 feet, when you turn the quad a certain way, if you block the antenna and put the carbon fiber or the battery or somehow all the motors or something in between the antenna and you've blocked that signal. And right. If you do that, there's a good chance you're gonna lock out. Multi-link technology takes advantage of multiple receivers placed around the aircraft, so that if that happens, there's a good chance there's another receiver that's operating where there's not a shadow. And when that happens, the system keeps going seamlessly. Mm-hmm. So, like with my Red Bull, it's got one main receiver built into the AR7700, and then it's got a remote receiver that I've got on the tail with long extension. And that's far away from my batteries and my motor and everything. So it's optimized in that regard. You can really push it to the limit by doing things like putting a remote receiver way out on a wingtip. Yep. If you put it on a tail like I've got now, that's actually not really optimized, because it's going to have better performance going away. And when it turns around, you got the whole airplane shadowing it. So I actually don't have quite as good a signal coming back as I do going out. Not a big deal if you have a return to home, but not optimized. If you put it on the wingtip, it's kind of eliminates that problem. So there's all these little things you can do to think about it that's not even really changing the radio at all, but it's just trying to visualize what's going on and doing the most you can to take advantage of the technology you have available. And with Spektrum, that's, using receivers that have remotes and using long extensions and getting them way out.
And standing up.
And then, yeah, that's true too. I mean, it doesn't hurt, actually. It's a very simple thing. You can actually fly with your radio way down low. And then if you have a problem, you can raise your radio way up high.
Which is what we do.
I mean, it's a very simple thing you can do. So it will definitely improve your signal quality. But, there's a lot of little things you can do, like proper grounding techniques. Yeah. You should always have everything grounded back at the same point, all the different systems, all the different subcomponents, grounded back as close to the battery as possible. And those little things like that will help improve everything from video quality to potentially the range of the aircraft, but that's, negligible. And I just prefer to try to do everything right. And if you do everything right, then you can start checking off, things that are probably not causing a problem. So if you try to keep all the wiring really clean, and you try to keep the wiring away from the receiver, the antennas in particular, it's stuff like that that really goes a long way. When you take a quad and you bury a single antenna receiver up against a carbon fiber frame with a bunch of wires, you could easily take a system that could have a mile in open air and make it lock out in like 50 feet. It's just a matter of like stuffing it in a bad situation. And then you're basically like, you know, doing everything you can to try to prevent it from working correctly.
Right.
So somewhere between there, you know, like the worst possible situation and the best possible situation being a total free air, you know, there's nothing there to interfere with.
Antenna being on the mountain.
Or, you know, you have reflections and you have shadows. So, anyway, you know, most people end up somewhere in between. You want to try to as close to the optimized side as you can and play safe. So
yeah, well, you know, one of the things I wanted to say is like a lot of guys ask how far can you go, right? You know, like that used to be like how high and how far, you know, those are those questions. And really it's not really how far, it's how good of space are you in? What's that space like? You know, that area you're in. If you're in a neighborhood, you're not going to get a mile. You don't even think that. You know, you might get to the next block.
Speaking
you
of
might.
Spot that we fly on the Oregon coast is epic. There's nothing out there. And
Right.
we can fly for a mile and not have, like, I can literally fly for a mile on 5.8 with a basic receiver. Both
Right.
video and control are so clean and clear that you can just go and go and go. And then you're like, oh, look at how far I've gone. But
Yeah.
you don't even notice because the video is so clean. I mean, it's remarkable.
Right. But yeah, so you know, you have to realize where you're at, you know, for distance, you know, like, okay, so yeah, you go into the nearest park and you pretty much everybody can fly across the park. Yeah, unless you're doing the absolute wrong thing, which is tucking your antennas inside the ship in the middle of the noisiest part of the ship, then you're pretty much going to have at least 1,000-foot range, you know. But to get past that, you have to start doing all the right things, like the antennas are out from the middle of the ship. You know, one on each pole on each side. So if you got an antenna going vertical and you got one going horizontal, that's going to increase your range. If you have your antennas, you know, like
okay, so here's the thing.
Go ahead.
You're not going to get the same range out of one of the receivers like a 4649 or a 4648 as you will out of a full range receiver, because those receivers are optimized for close range, and the dual antenna setup is not the same as a multi-link technology receiver that actually has a remote receiver. The difference is that, you know, you have one that's actually just going between the two antennas, and the other has got totally separate receiver circuitry. So they both have advantages, and they both can like have an advantage over a single antenna, and they're both a form of diversity, but they're different. And so it's important to recognize that. And so if you're trying to optimize where you're putting your antenna on your quad and you're using a racing antenna or a racing receiver, you're still not going to get the most out of it because you're using a racing receiver. And a racing receiver is meant to be as small and light as possible for a racing quad. Your best friend, if you're going to try to do something like this with a Spektrum setup, is going to be that AR7700 that I was talking about that I'm using on the Red Bull airplane, because it'll still give you your serial receiver output. You can use, it's actually got a remote receiver output that acts like a remote receiver, so you can connect into your flight controller. But it's got the dual circuitry receiver, so you can put one antenna optimized wherever you would normally do it around the aircraft, and then you can use that extension and you can put that other circuit with another antenna way out on an arm.
True.
You can't compare to that setup. You'll have way better performance than compared to the racing receiver. Yes. So that's the first thing that I would recommend. If you want to try flying Spektrum and you want to try doing some of this, check out that AR7700 receiver. That's going to go much better than any of the racing receivers. Yes, it's going to be a little bit bigger, but if you're going to try to optimize it for going a little further, that's one of your that's one of the simplest things that you can do. So
Simple.
anyway.
Cool. Elvin, what else you got? Like, what else? Because like you stretch out on long range all the time, not necessarily quads, but what else should people be looking for?
Well, I'm trying to break my record. My personal record is 3.5 miles. So I've flown from Mount Angel Abbey, which is a nun place, out to Silverton, Oregon, which is a beautiful open valley flight. And when you get up there, you just like you're looking around, and you're just amazed that you're there. That it's a clear shot. You can see the town off in the distance, and you just fly toward the town, and you turn around and come back, and it's pretty much a clean shot. But the things I like to do is I like to have my ground station set up so that my antennas are up off the ground, and so that I can get the maximum reception. Because,
by the way, I don't mean to interrupt.
Go ahead.
I also got 1.8 miles on a focal with a single antenna with an Omni antenna.
What? That's hard.
600 watt with a 600 milliwatt transmitter buried in the fuselage of that airplane with an Omni antenna. Omni antennas on both sides, and I'm doing that mostly because I want to be able to do head tracking and not have cables. I've already cut the cables to do wireless head tracking, so why am I going to put another cable to a ground station? Right. I could, but I did that flight and had video pretty solid with Omnis on both sides. And that new video receiver on the focal is not too shabby. I'm a big fan of these single the little Fat Shark single, what do you call it? I don't know. By the way, I hope you guys like the USB built-in USB deal on the batteries.
Oh yeah, they're way better.
Yeah, that's finally somebody.
I tried to push for it, and I pushed it. Finally
somebody. I like it. Gotta make that anyway. But I brought you here because I wanted to talk. I got like 15 people contacted me saying, "Hey man, what kind of long range can I do with a Spektrum?" And yes, most of these guys didn't know that you can't go, a mile on a satellite or a 4648 or any one of those antennas that are actually meant for short range racing. So I had to tell them that, but like most of the guys that I've been dealing with lately are trying to get into wings to do the long range. So, or do short range, anything under a mile is short range to me. Anything over a mile you're starting to break into that long range. And the only difference between the practices of the beginning of long range to the maximum distance is the fact that you're changing from running 5.8 for video to 2.4 to 1.3, or even if to do 50 kilometers, really, 900 megahertz is a lot. You're looking at a different type of character of a ship when you fly in those kind of distances.
There's only people in the world that are doing that, and that's out over the ocean and stuff, right?
Right. But those things you need to look at as you progress further and further out. So for 5.8, you could do 5 miles, 5.8. You could do more if you go get a big bad ground station system for it. You could do more, but really, I think we most of us go to 1.3 when we want to go past 5 miles. And Aaron is one of the guys I know that has done that. He's gone. He's done 900. He's done 1.3. He's done 2.4. He's done
I've
5.
played all this stuff. I've never actually gone all that far. I mean, I've gone a couple miles, but I've definitely played with all the different frequencies. But honestly, I mean, I've never had a desire to go more than a couple miles because it's really kind of just risky. And I mean, it's risky for your model, let alone whatever else risks you're talking about that you don't even want to have anything to do with. So, you want to be very, very cautious when you're doing these things, and you want to take baby steps. So one of the things you can do with any kind of like extended range flying, let's call it that.
Okay.
You want to take it one step at a time. Whether you're going, a few feet further than your football field with your quad, or you're going, a few 100 feet further with your wing, or a mile further with your completely decked out setup, you want to take it a little bit at a time. And you want to always try to have a setup that's got more control range than video range. And that's something that if you can achieve that, you'll be really well off, because then your video will start to fade. Hopefully you never lose control and you're good to go. Otherwise, you might lose it and get to watch it go. So you want to optimize it. Your control range is always further than your video range. And you can do that by selecting appropriate video transmitters. If you've got a little airplane that you know isn't going to go very far, put a little tiny video transmitter on it and don't let it go very far.
Right.
So, those kind of selections can really go a long ways towards your whole experience. It'll naturally limit how far it'll go. Another thing is really become aware of your environment and then do a lot of frequent checks. You want to do a lot of checks where you're like flying away and flying toward yourself and flying perpendicular to like your flight path home. And, you're flying circles. Like if you're going out any distance whatsoever, you pick intervals and you do a circle every so far.
Right.
And you make sure everything's working okay. And if anything's not going right, you turn around. You always fly upwind. Unless you want to run out with a dead battery and be downwind, you always fly upwind. So, it's all these little things like that you just have to be smart about it, and it'll go a long ways. Because if you end up with a dead battery downwind, you're not getting back.
No, those are two really important tips, just to repeat them. Number one, incrementally do a loop or a circle so that you have coverage all the way around your plane. That's actually first time I heard of it. I mean, super smart idea. And the second
I'll
time,
give credit where credit's due, because one of the pioneers who has done a lot of positive, and I'm not even going to go into the other side, but I'll just give him credit where credit's due. That one came from Trappy, from his early days of mountain surfing. And if you don't know what Trappy did in the early days, he did some amazing stuff where he like went up into the mountains for like a mile, down in the valley, and he'd fly up to the mountaintop and he'd circle around the mountaintop and then he'd bomb down the mountain, ripping through the treetops. And I was in love with those videos, and they were really, really cool. And he explained how he did everything incrementally. Since then, he's done a lot of stuff, and he's, made a lot of waves with certain groups, and I think he's an awesome guy. I think he's also had a lot of whatever. I don't know. I didn't want to go there. But the fact of the matter is I absolutely love his early stuff. And that was one of the tips that I got from him. The guy was totally right. And, you could say whatever you want about how he pushes limits, but he's usually pretty successful with his stuff working. So.
Right.
No, he does a lot of stuff like that.
Even though we can all say this, right? He's even though he's. I was trying to find a good way to say this today, and I screwed it up. But what it is you're not supposed to put your skills on display, right? This is one of the things I remember Dennis telling me. He told me, he said, look, you can be the best pilot in the world, but you don't have to go out to prove it, right? You can you can, those skills are there for when you need it. That's not the leading point when you go to the field, So what he's saying is, what he was saying is like, Trappy's a hell of a pilot. He's a hell of a pilot, but he's also a hell of a setup guy. He checks. He just don't throw shit together and just expect it to work. He's done the testing. He goes through a process to get to that distance. He knows that it's like Alex, in his little pink plane, in his little radio bag, right? Everywhere we go, we see him with that bag. And as long as he's got that bag, he'll just toss it up in the air and fly that thing forever. Right. And that's what I'm talking about. That right there is like that. They know that ship. They know what their equipment is capable of doing.
Definitely. And it's one of those things where, like a lot of the best pilots in the world, they do push boundaries, and sometimes they might go over that boundary. So love them, hate them.
I just don't record mine.
There we go. Well, okay. The other tip that I was talking about, flying upwind so that on your way back, the wind's for you, not against you. That's smart. That's common sense.
I think it comes from the people, like the old adage about like canoeing upriver or whatever, upstream. I mean, it's the same thing.
Sometimes you don't think about it, but you know what? That's really smart, and you have to be, because if you're going to go long range, you're probably going to be tossing at least up, $500 and up into the air. And I'm sure most of us don't like to burn that type of money. So we want it back.
I want more than one flight.
I mean, I don't really have any great recommendations for how you can do it safely unless you have some sort of safety net. And then the catch-22 is, if the safety net is there, you have to be able to make it work correctly, or it's not a safety net.
Right.
So, the argument is that if you don't have a fancy system, you don't have anything to go wrong. And that's very valid, because if you make a very simple airplane, you don't have to worry about an autopilot malfunction, or something being calibrated wrong, or a sensor being wrong.
Right.
I don't know, any number of things that could happen, or you just didn't set it up right. Now, on the other side, you could just simply fly it out of range and feel really stupid that you lose the thing and you don't have anything to save it. So it really depends, like, how hard you want to push it and how you want to try to approach the thing. Because if you feel like you're the kind of person who likes to tinker, and you feel like you're willing to take the time to make the autopilot work right, you cannot expect it to work when you need it unless you make it work when you don't. So you have to put time into making it work and making sure it works the way you expect, and making sure it's tuned, and making sure that you can rely on it to some degree. You can never really depend on it, but you can't really ever rely on it, but you can have some degree of confidence that it will work. If you don't have any degree of confidence that it'll work, chances are it's not going to work.
Right.
So if you haven't got any interest in going through the trouble of like tuning an autopilot, which isn't entirely different than tuning a quad, you probably want to just keep it real simple and not push it too far.
Right. Well, I agree. And look, return to home systems are there to bring it back when you've gone that just a little too far, but if you don't have it set up properly and you haven't tested it, then how do you know it's going to come back? You know what I mean? How do you know that you had it set up right? Like I lately I've been playing around with the iNav stuff. Like I got a Vector and two of my ships now, and they work. And so does the iNav. It works too. There are different setups. They're different birds in different beasts of returns. The iNav, you have a lot more tuning capabilities than the Vector. but the vector's proven time over time over time. And one of the things about Eagle Tree, they've been one of the best at what they're doing now with the vector and the mini vector. I'd wish the mini vector was easier to set up. I'd like to use it more, but it's a pain in the butt when you're using it. If you're not using it in a quad, it's horrible, to tell you the truth, for me. But the vector and the wing, the full vector is the bomb. It's easy to set up. Once you get it plugged in, it works pretty much with everything, every plane, every quad that you can get your hands on. But
yeah, I mean, I don't have anything to do with Eagle Tree. I've used the vector in a couple airplanes, a couple quads, and it's always worked. So for what it's worth, it's not something that I'm specifically endorsing, but it's always worked for me. So,
well, I mean, that's true. And like I was saying, the iNav is something new. It's new. It's and I've used it with my Spektrum radio, and you set the trigger, and the trigger is when I bind with a switch on, and when I lose contact with the radio, it goes back to the original bind failsafe. So it turns it on, and that's the return home switch. So go ahead, Aaron. I just saw the light come on.
Another thing that's really cool about the return to home setup on my Red Bull is that I've got the return to home test setup working so that the head tracking still works when it kicks into return to home. Now, obviously, if I actually lose radio and it's returning home without a radio link, that doesn't do anything. But if I'm testing the return to home, the airplane turns around and does its thing, and I can go for a ride, and I can do head tracking while the airplane's flying back by itself. It's really cool.
See,
you're a passenger at that point. You're just going along for the ride.
Flight 293.
Yeah, I mean, I have it set up on a switch, so you can flip the switch and it goes into, a return to home test. It's great. I love it. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, that's the thing. So, there's a lot of radio systems out there and stuff that we'll go over in the next couple of weeks. This is one of the things I wanted to talk about. And we're going to touch base on pretty much all of them, and we're going to use references from this to talk about the next one we'll accumulate all of them all together in the end. But long range is something that I think you have to think about. It's a planning process. One of the things I remember learning in the beginning when I was first starting to fly FPV, a guy told me, he said, really, you need to treat it like you're flying a real plane. And I said, okay, so what do you do when you're getting ready to take off, load up your plane and go out in the backyard and fire up and take off somewhere? And he walked me through. He says, first you make a flight plan, and then you fly that plan. He said, you don't deviate from that. He said, you go out, you say, okay, I'm going to go from here to here, and then I'm going to turn around and come back. And then I'm going to go from here to here, and then I'm going to turn around and come back. And that's kind of like what Aaron was talking about with Trappy and him, how you ease your way out to find out where the bad spot. Because I've flown in places where if you head this way, you're going to get video issues. But if you head this way, you're not going to get any. You know what I mean? And so it might be some tower out on the hill somewhere interrupting in this area. But if I stay on this side of the hill, I never see it. So
that's another thing. You can't expect RF to be predictable. I mean, like, it's really, really weird. It's kind of a black art. And I think the people who understand the most about it probably understand how little we really understand about RF.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is that you cannot expect it to be consistent in this modern world. And you're using analog technology for video that has this wonderful advantage of zero latency. But we really have to be aware of things like, outside interference and shadowing and line of sight and all these things. If you go flying slightly behind a mountain ridge, it's gone. So you might not be flying very far, but if there's like a hillside and you go behind that hillside, it's done. It's gone. Radio, video control, everything. Digital video would be the same thing. You're not getting it behind the mountain. No. So sometimes it's just a matter of like understanding how everything works like that. And then also a valley can channel the video signal and the control signal. So if you're flying down a valley, it can be a big advantage. If you pick an area that's known to have really good clean RF performance, you're going to be a lot better off, because you can have really, really strange, unpredictable stuff happen for video and control in areas that there's RF stuff going on, and it's just going to come out of the blue. So anyway, for what it's worth, it's a lot more difficult to get consistent areas around the Portland area there now. Like, we're way out in the middle of nowhere. We've got a couple of frequencies here that seem to have a little bit of trouble, but for the most part, you can just go wherever the heck you want. And as far as, but when you get closer to metropolitan areas, you have a lot more stuff going on. And
beacons and radio beacons and tower signals and, pings and, all kinds of stuff that you don't really understand that's going on constantly, and you're flying around and you think, oh yeah, 5.8 is just wonderful. And you go around, go to take off somewhere and you like, wow, I got barely no video signal and I'm only a couple of 100 feet out, and there's a tower facing you.
And it might not even be a tower. If there's an apartment complex or something, it's got a lot of Wi-Fi activity. Wi-Fi activity usually won't affect you too bad unless it's like a massive amount of it. And then it can start, taking up the band. It just depends, because, obviously not all devices are dual band devices. And then even then, they're only using the ISM band. Well, not exclusively.
So I think one of the things that you're trying to say is, if you're really thinking about doing long range, one of the very first things that you want to do is actually start searching for an area in which you even want to attempt it. So you're looking for like a high area with an easy line of sight that you can either go down slope or, go straight out from your area. And then you want to test it, because just because it's a high area, you don't really know what's going on. There could be, a Wi-Fi tower, a cell tower right next to you. You might not even notice it.
Like, I don't know all the details, but I know there's a spot where they do a lot of slope soaring outside of Denver, and there's a couple guys that fly FPV there, and they've had some really weird interference issues on certain frequencies because of, I think it might be from some sort of digital transmission coming out of Denver or something, but they've specifically had problems at this spot where you're like, you would never think they're going to have a problem. But anyway.
Definitely need to scope out some areas. So, any suggestions on how to scope out an area? You use Google Maps, you just drive around until you find a village, or?
I mean, yeah, not really, other than just being cautious, because you don't want to be flying around high tension lines if you can help it, obviously. It's not just about hitting the lines. There's a lot of stuff going on with high voltage that's messy in the RF world. And so you're not doing yourself any favors if you're near high tension lines. And then, like Al said, towers and stuff, and just general maintaining line of sight and avoiding population areas will help you, not just because it makes sense for common sense to not fly over people, but because they will, if you find really densely populated urban areas, they're going to affect how well your system's working anyway. So it's not always possible. There's certain people that just aren't going to be able to fly this kind of stuff. You need to understand you're going to have to find a safe and appropriate place to fly it, and you can't just go out willy-nilly and go doing it over the neighborhood. It might be okay to fly over the neighborhood sometimes in some situations, probably not for long range. So
well, what does it say? So they say if you make someone's property part of your flight path and it's part of the flight path, then you need permission to fly it. But if you're just out flying, huh?
It's state to state, isn't it? And then the FAA took over or whatever. They threw out all, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah. But I'm just giving basic ground rules, you know what I mean?
It's really right.
Yeah. You know, like me, I go check Google Map. I look around the area. Then I'll go out and drive that area and drive along the road looking to see if I see anything that might give me some interference. You know, I might even put my goggles on the seat while I'm driving around and see if I pick up a whole bunch of noise while I'm driving through a particular area. So those are the things that I suggest you do. You go out and check. Just check, man. It's a much better flight when you get your shit back. You know what I mean?
Well, you know, you said to check. One thing that you should be clear on there. Obviously, if you have a video receiver that has a scanner, you can check for low RSSI values. Right. But you can just check for clean video. You shouldn't have. Usually, if there's like horizontal lines coming through the video, it's some kind of digital interference.
Right.
If you have, you know, like you can see some of these horizontal lines, even if there's not much signal coming through, not really any specific signal, just sort of interference. Once you get used to it a little bit, you can tell if it's like, you know, like digital interference or something that's like other flyers. You can usually tell if it's someone else that's got a video. If it's you, if you're not receiving the full video, you can tell if it's video and that type of thing. So having some what you're actually dealing with from your source of interference, I mean, that goes a long way in trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah,
definitely. Cool. Anything else, Al, that you can think of?
You know, it's just, I think I want everybody to understand that you can go out here and you can do this, and it's not really a hard thing. It's to me, it's a badge about going long distance, going a little bit outside your normal flying range, but it just takes being prepared and thinking things through. You know, you want your stuff back. So don't just go charging out into the woods. You wouldn't just go running through a blackberry bush. You know, you get a couple of machetes and you chop your way through. And that's pretty much what you need to do, is be prepared. There is struggles, and like Aaron said, for Spektrum, you really want to use full range receivers. You don't want to just take a quad and try to use a remote receiver or the satellite receiver, is what most people call them today. And you can have distance and go and have a great time with Spektrum. You don't need to have, Dragon Link or Easy UHF or, FlySky 900 megahertz or Crossfire. You can do these things with these systems. Basically, you just have to do them cautiously and test things out as you go out further and further, and then you'll find out the actual range, how far, but you'll be prepared for it.
Now that I'm pretty comfortable with the limits of Spektrum and I understand how to implement it, I'm very comfortable flying medium to largish airplanes. I'm flying gas airplanes, fuel-powered airplanes with FPV, with all Spektrum gear. And as long as you keep it within what you would want to do for normal kind of field flying anyway, I don't have any problem with it. And I don't use return to home. But I'm not pushing the limits to where I'm going to check and see if I'm going to get a lockout. I'm keeping it within, Spektrum was really designed for normal flying field ranges. And so if you're flying FPV at normal flying field ranges and towards the edge of what you would consider normal flying field ranges, that would be a mile plus a little bit. Yeah. But you better have it set up right, and you better not be trying to fly behind any trees or anything like that. If you go a half a mile away and try to fly behind some trees, you're going to have some problems.
Right.
So, I mean.
But you're going to have that with pretty much any.
Yeah.
2.4.
Well, any system for the most part. I mean, maybe not with a lower frequency system, but the fact of the matter is, if you push it hard enough, you will find the limit for any system out there eventually. Right. So being smart about it and having like a backup plan and not having it in a situation where you can't get it back if you have it fail safe. Ideally, there's some way that it's gonna either recover the radio or you're gonna be able to get the model back and or something. And worst case scenario, not flying in an area where it's going to cause any problems.
Right.
Definitely.
And that's the thing. For me, I do a lot of checking. So it's I haven't lost a plane yet. So and I'm gonna knock on that wood for that. But it just takes time, being cautious, taking things slowly and maturely, and you'll have safe flights, and you'll experience something that not a lot of pilots can experience, because they don't either have the patience or the time to do. Because being up in the air for 15, 20 minutes is not the same as a quad flight, a race, going to a race course. You come down mentally exhausted after a day of flying out to 20, 30 miles out and back. I know a lot of pilots that do that, and they come home, they're exhausted. They say it's mental work because you're not just flying, you're cataloging the whole way out in case something happens, so you can work your way back, and it's a lot of flight. It's a flight plan. You got to have that and fly the plan. That makes me happy when I look down at the sheet and I go, okay, so if I'm coming back and I see this house right here, I know I'm halfway. You know what I mean? If I'm coming back and I see this tree by this barn, I know I'm 3/4 of the way back or whatever. You know what I mean? So that's how I do it, and I want to share this with as many people as possible. I mean, you just have to be careful, take your time, and go slow, and you can work your way out.
Another thing we didn't mention is always try to fly with a spotter.
True that.
But your spotter should always be able to keep an eye on the plane. You don't have to be able to keep it necessarily to where the spotter can actually take over control of the plane, but you should be able to keep the airplane in a situation, even if it's way far away, where the spotter can go, yeah, I can see where it is, and I know that you're not going to be hitting any full-size airplanes. Let me give you one little story here before we go. You won't believe it, but it's true. I was flying about a mile away with a Twin Star in Oregon years ago, and I heard an engine, and I turned the airplane around, and I was below 400 feet, and I was out over farm field, and I saw a Cub well below my altitude making a pass at my person from FPV. And so this Cub was coming in to pass me. He must have seen my radio, and he was flying over me, and my airplane was out there. I stayed out there because what else am I going to do?
Right.
And he made a couple passes back and forth and thought he was I don't know what he thought he was doing. He was no more than treetop level. It was weird. It's one of those videos I never published, but I don't feel like I did anything wrong. In fact, I feel like I did the right thing because I was already below 400 feet. I was not anywhere near his airport, and I didn't try to follow him. I didn't try to do anything. I just sort of, I don't know what I could have done. I just waited until he finished goofing around, and then he flew off. And anyway,
that sounds awfully dangerous on his part.
Yeah, it does.
Very dangerous on his part, but you have to be prepared for the unexpected. And in a situation where it's the worst case possible thing, it is still a toy. And if that airplane for some reason had gotten in a situation where my airplane was going to cause any kind of trouble, if he had been flying towards me instead of away from me, I would have crashed the airplane on purpose because it's not worth it.
Right.
When I saw that Cub, he was flying away from my model towards my person. So it was really strange because I could hear the engine coming towards me and I could see it flying away from me. It was a trip. But in any event, if it would have been a little bit different, I probably would have had to purposely crash my model to avoid I don't think the full-size pilot ever had any idea where my model was. So
that's dangerous. And on that note, it's really good idea to always be aware of your surroundings. That's what Aaron's trying to say, and it's the truth for anything that you do. But I'm gonna start wrapping this up because we're way over an hour now at this point. And Aaron,
had fun. Thanks.
Yeah, we really appreciate you coming on to share your knowledge. You know, you have a lot of knowledge. Spektrum is a very popular radio system, so you know, a lot of people, they're going to try this stuff. So we're going to try to have this information out there so that people don't do goofy things and lose expensive toys. That's basically what it is.
Yeah, I hope we get more people trying the head tracking. I think it's really exciting, and anyone needs help with head tracking stuff, you know, Spektrum.
Aaron's the man.
Aaron's the man.
He helped me with mine.
It's the only system you're going to find that's got wireless head tracking available. To my knowledge, I mean, maybe there's something else out there, but it's pretty darn cool when you get it all working. And I hope people will give it a shot. So
hey,
and Spektrum is supposed to be working with some of the other systems, the systems out now. So
yeah, no, it's actually, I can say I was. So the DX9 will be compatible with the Crossfire here very shortly. So there is going to be an option. You will either have to void your warranty and do the work yourself, or I'm not sure exactly how they're going to handle it, to be honest. But they're working on trying to do it. It's something that the team pilots have been flying for over a year. The team pilots had to fly it at some of the events around the world where they were required to run Crossfire. So we made it compatible. And it's only compatible with the DX9 right now, but they are considering it for future developments. And, you know, it's something that we're trying to make sure that the community is taken care of. So
I hope you really push forward with that, even if it's just for the DX9, because there's a lot of people that like Spektrum radios, but if they had the option to be able to switch out every once in a while, I think they'll go for it. Because, like, I know for me, like, I don't really particularly love the FR Skies base model radios, but a lot of people choose that because you can put a Crossfire on it. So it's I hope they pursue it, because I like Spektrum radios. I like their gimbals. I like how they feel, and there's a lot of accessories for it. You know?
Yes.
Well, I'm just happy that I can continue being part of the team, and you know, I hope you guys enjoy the manuals I write. I'm not going to say which ones I've done, but but I have not done all of them by any means, and I'm just really happy that it seems like, you know, Spektrum has had some really good success in the past. Got some more success coming in the future. There's some really exciting things coming down the pike, and I think there's a lot of things that people should be happy about with Spektrum, and things that they should be looking out for. So
cool. And you know, when they announce them, I'm sure good old Al here will be poking you to come back on and talk about them.
I you know, like I said, it's a great radio system, and I enjoy it. You know, and I don't have nothing negative to say about it. You know.
My thing is that if I have a problem, which it's not like I usually have a problem, they usually just go, Aaron, you're doing this wrong. And I go, oh, I didn't really understand how that worked, did I? But no, when I actually want to talk to someone about how I want something to work or understand how something works, I can go talk to the engineers who made it work. And it's a pretty amazing thing. So I'm very fortunate to have an opportunity to work in that environment. And the people I work with are just phenomenal. So
anyway, smart people that work at Spektrum, but yeah, most of them guys is cool to hang out with too.
Definitely, cool, man. Well, again, we appreciate you coming on. Thank you for spending your time with us, and you know, we hope you come on again, and we'll talk about other cool stuff from Spektrum, and then we'll start a list of what manuals we think you write, and we'll see if we can guess it.
What I like to do is I like to find some screw up in the manual, and I go, hey, you see this right here?
You're just mean. But you two are friends. You can pick on them for that. I can't. Okay.
Yeah, I do.
I tell you what, it drives me crazy trying to deal with all the different languages. I found myself making corrections in French the other day. I'm like, what am I doing? I don't know. Anyway.
It's like, I don't even speak French and I'm correcting it. All right. We're signing off. Aaron, thank you so much.
Have a good one. Bye.
Peace out.